Hi, everyone. It's George LaRocque. Welcome back to WorkTech. I am excited to introduce the WorkTech community to a company and product called QChange. QChange describes itself as soft skills intelligence for the whole organization. And now soft skills have been called the new power skills, and QChange helps your existing employees develop and practice what they call the soft skills that matter. And I am joined today by CEO and co-founder James Kelley to learn more about what all of that means. Welcome, James.
Hey, thanks, George, for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about myself. Always great to talk about yourself. Just kidding. And about QChange, more importantly.
Yeah, enough about me. What do you think about me? But yeah, well, I've had the pleasure of working with you quite a bit through the Impact WorkTech Accelerator. So I know a lot about QChange and a lot about you. But for those who don't, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and a little bit about QChange?
Yeah, sure. So just by background, I'm an overachieving nerd. I should not have received a PhD, but I went off to Australia in 2006, received a PhD in consumer psychology. And then I spent 12 years swimming upstream in academia, realizing that I'm not really meant for that space. And so I did that until 2020, but in 2019, QChange was launched while I was living in the Middle East, just outside Dubai, and moved to Bend, Oregon with where my co-founder is in 2020, right at the start of COVID, which is a whole other story that probably revolves around having some drinks because it was insane moving during that time with a family of 6.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, a lot of stories there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what's the I'd love for you to share like what QChange's why is, or like a
Yeah.
little around like the origin story. Like how did it
Yeah.
all come to be?
Yeah. So I'll talk about, my co-founder and I both kind of come from this from two different perspectives. But for me, I never had, in academia, they don't really give development opportunities. Let's just start with that. But if we just go outside of academia, just in general in organizations, when you're a new manager, frontline, whether mid-level manager, you don't have the opportunities and you often have no idea how you're showing up. And so I kind of found myself going to these work meetings, trying to be a better leader, having led at different capacities in my life in different forms, and never really understanding what I was doing, how I was doing it, and the impact I was having. And so when we designed QChange, with my background in consumer psychology, we utilize a lot of science to think about how do people learn best, right? And learning best is usually through experiences. And so I kind of took the notion of experiential learning, which comes out of academia for me, and tried to apply that to the soft skill area where often you're not aware how you're showing up, but if you use just a little bit of science, it might make you aware of it as you walk into a meeting and after a meeting. You might be more aware of what people are seeing or how they're perceiving your behavior. And so the why for me, if I was to sum that up, is I just got tired of not knowing, right? I just got tired of having no insights ever outside an annual review, which was tethered to some sort of raise, which then is too late because you've already done the damage for 12 months. So like you don't have the opportunity to approach it differently in the flow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I mean, that's a pretty representative story, right? I mean, I think most people
Yeah.
you're unique and lucky if you're in an environment where there's actually that kind of nurturing development taking
Yeah.
place. So how does it work? How does the product engage with
Yeah.
the user?
So it's so simple, but I always find a struggle to say this is how simply it works. So the real simpleness of it, if that's a real word, I don't think it is, but the simplicity of it, that's what I was
There
going
you
for.
go. There you go.
The simplicity of it is that we use intelligence to figure out which meetings that an individual is going into where certain soft skill behaviors are best represented. So I'll give you an example. So if you're going into a strategy meeting, I don't want to nudge you about being compassionate. I want to nudge you around being strategic because
Okay.
that's the type of meeting you're going into. And so our system is smart enough to know the different types of meetings and then what you're working on. And then we send you a nudge 10 minutes before that meeting to practice that particular area. So a nudge And a strategy example might be, look for moments in the meeting to connect today to the future, right? As an example. So they're always action-based, like 95% action-based.
Okay.
After the meeting, though, that's a great prompt. And we hear this from our users, hey, that prompt is really helpful. But then after the meeting, we ask you a simple question. In this meeting, did you connect today to the future on a scale of 1 to 5? How well did you connect today to the future? And so I might give myself a 4, but where it gets really interesting isn't how I see myself, because I think I walk on water, right? So the reality is that those around you may not think that. They might think you have rocks on your feet. And so we asked those individuals in the meeting that you've invited, how well did James connect today to the future of the organization, right? On a scale of 1 to 5. And so that data is aggregated anonymously and delivered back to me in the flow of work. And that allows me to say, oh, I gave myself a 4. The team gave me a 3 on average. And I can stop, or I can ask for written feedback in that moment to get more clarity. And based on that written feedback, I can provide gratitude to those who I don't know who they are, but I'm engaging them in a different way to bring their voices into my development or growth as a leader. And there's a whole bunch of science that goes over this, but that hopefully gives you or paints a picture.
Yeah. Well, it's very, I mean, it's very practical because it's in the flow of work, right? It's in the flow as you're attending these meetings. What is the, you mentioned the science, what kind of, without getting too deep, but what kind of science does it leverage?
Well, when you look at astrophysics, I'm just kidding. So like we use really 3 core theories. We use one, the overarching theory is self-determination theory. And that theory for the audience is really basic. It's a 30+ year intrinsic motivation theory. And what it comes down to is, and what they've found across probably 70 different contexts, is that when an individual has autonomy, has mastery, and has relationships combined, they're more intrinsically motivated to act or behave. And so that's the first overarching theory. But more importantly, the kind of sub-theories that drive the experience is nudge theory. We use a lot of BJ Fogg work. And so BJ Fogg talks about this idea of behavior stacking. So we know you're going into a meeting. That's a behavior you have to do every day in the work environment. And so we use what you want to work on, what soft skill area you want to work on. And we actually deliver a behavior experience right before that to practice to what you're going to. So we're kind of stacking 2 behaviors. And then really the final theory we're talking about is experiential theory. And so when you look at a learning triangle, a learning framework, at the very bottom is usually classroom, usually some sort of experience that almost everyone's delivered inside an organization. At the very top of the pyramid, at the very, very top is I can go teach somebody else. One step beneath that is the having an experience in the flow, a real-time experience. And so what it talks about there is that when you have a real-time experience are tethered to an emotion. An emotion is triggered in the brain. Connecting those together gives you an experience and a memory and a retention of up to 75% of what you're learning in the flow. And so we use kind of the experience, the nudge, and the overarching self-determination theory around the human behavior.
Yeah, it makes such sense because we know that whether it's changing a behavior or whether it's improving something, the classroom only gets me so far, right? Like you can give me all the training on soft skills and all of the content on how to behave in a meeting to reach certain goals, but being there to nudge me on the way in, give me feedback afterward, that's really powerful. And
let's even like zoom out on that. I mean, when you think about it, we've been hitting the same nail with the same tool for 30, 40, 50 years, getting the same results. And yes, people are coming up with new digitized versions of e-learning and new digitized versions of behavior change. But when you start stripping back the layer, the processes are always the same. The immediacy might move up because it's online, but the challenge they've all had, and what I think we address, is in context. That in context is so relevant that yes, a classroom is important. It gives you awareness of what you're trying to learn. But because we're fallible human beings, being aware doesn't mean we're going to put it into action. And so I'm aware of a lot of things. I'm aware I'm bald. I'm aware that when I grow a mustache, I look horrible, but like I'm aware, but I still do these things sometimes. And so when we think about the classroom, you think about how you've learned as your whole entire life, we learn out of context in a classroom. And what that means is that you only retain very little limited amount after 7 days, unless you're putting it into context. And so we really feel strongly about this, that the whole entire industry, and it really starts with HR, unfortunately, is they go about this backwards, meaning we're going to tell you what you should be doing in context, out of context. And that's not helpful for somebody. The other problem that I think we really solve, and sorry, George, I'm a little on a soapbox here.
This is great.
Is that it's usually only the top 2 to 10% that receive 80% of any of the soft skill training budget, because it's usually high touch and it's usually out of context and it's usually for the few, not the many. And because of that, there's a massive skill gap that's going on in organizations, and they're worried about retention. They're worried about millennials and Gen Z, and yet they want to keep ticking the same boxes because they're not empowered typically to want to try something different. And so we're finding success with the innovators who are saying, okay, what has worked, what we've done hasn't worked. We have to try something different. And so I think that's the real problem. I think opportunity, I'll change that a bit more positive here. The opportunity that we see is that we can reach the whole of the organization, because we didn't talk about this, because we're fully embedded inside collaboration tools. So we're fully embedded inside Microsoft Teams today. So that allows us to be a chat bot that's pinned to your bar at the top. So you're receiving these nudges, getting your feedback, having a dashboard to see your growth, but it's where you're doing all of your work all day long in this hybrid environment. And so it's not another piece of software someplace else in an ecosystem I have to go to. It's embedded in where you're doing the work.
Yeah, that's really key. And I think it's one of the challenges with the old school models is, sort of the point that you're making. It doesn't scale. It doesn't scale across the organization. It's limited. But this being there where the work's getting done, being in the flow of the work, and being this digital model that's new, allows you to scale with the organization. You're not dependent on classroom and logistics and so forth. So you mentioned innovators. What does an ideal customer look like, or maybe the customers that you have today? What are what's been your experience about their success?
Yeah, like, and is there any early stage company? You really look for those who are willing to take the risk. And so what we see today is we have kind of two groups that are using us. One group is a Fortune 100 consulting firm that sees our solution as an innovative way that they can resell to their clients. And that's because, again, it's whole system. It's not just for the few. The other side that we see is another Fortune 600 company that's using our solution, that's trying to drive growth mindset across the organization. And so they see this as an innovative way that we're supporting a global program that they're rolling out right now with a leadership development company. So this is through a partnership. And so this leadership development company is going to go in and they do these 3-day seminars, right? Here's what growth mindset is. Here's what BJ Fogg says, and da-da-da-da. And here's a solution we're going to embed inside your experience so you can practice these things in context. And so it's where we see the opportunity is one, really transforming human capital transformation projects, where we're trying to transform cultures, systems. And the other side of that is tethering with our partners who are trying to drive their content inside the organization to stick. And those are kind of the two biggest, I think, vehicles we have today.
And it sounds like you could pull that thread a little further. Any organization who's investing in that transformation, getting the new model, the new program, the new, whatever it is to stick. So it's correct. The employer or the third party, depending on which model. So that's so that could be is it a certain size company, or is it? really
Yeah,
more?
great question. So, it's so funny as you deal with startups all the time. It's that debate of who do you go after first,
Mhm.
right? Where do you
Yep.
go after first? And we took a big swing and we go after enterprise level sales.
Okay.
We can debate on the intelligence of doing so and the speed to market on that. That's a whole other conversation. But in doing so, we've achieved SOC 2 compliance, which is really, really important for any of these enterprise clients. So we go after organizations traditionally, not always, let's just be clear on this, that are 1 to 2,000 and larger.
Okay.
And the reason is that they typically have a meeting culture where they have to meet on the books using a calendar system versus smaller companies that are 1, 2, 3, 400, where you kind of can just rock up or show up and have a quick conversation. And so we like to have a little bit of structure around their meeting cultures as an opportunity to send these nudges in a timely manner.
Yeah. Yeah. And what does success look like for one of your customers?
So we're still in the learning phase, but based on the objectives that we work with our clients on, what do you want to achieve? The biggest thing, honestly, is just a measurement of the soft skill, because
Okay.
no one's been able to objectively measure soft skills. And so because we can objectively measure this at the macro level and then also at the individual level, we're allowing them to get real insights into the strengths and opportunities inside their organization to either grow or change a different direction or add a new behavior to what they're working on. The other metric that I don't know, I can't say I don't know if it's successful or not, is when we look at our super users across our user base right now, that's about 60% of our total user base we would consider super users. Right now, we have a 70% engagement rate over 90 days.
Wow.
That's really, really high. And the way that we're defining engagement is if I get a nudge, do I self-assess? Right? Because doing the self-assessment means that the others in your team will provide you feedback also. And so we are measuring that at a 70% rate with our super users, that when they get a nudge, they self-assess their behavior in that particular meeting that they're in. And so we think that's a really high metric that's not normal for behavior change solutions after 90 days. Usually about the 12-week mark, you start to see the numbers plummet. And so we think that's successful for us.
Yeah. I mean, those are great numbers from an engagement perspective. And I would say that I mean, there's so much energy in or behind the soft skills conversation right now. I mean, we've got a crisis in leadership, and we've got a crisis just in skills in general. And for anyone that's investing again in moving their organization down this path, having a tool that is both supporting that shift, but also measuring the success of those particular skills that you're working on. That's a great investment, because soft skills are soft by definition, and it's the CFO, the CEO. There's a lot, they're putting a lot of focus in this area, but understanding, this is a huge program for an enterprise, right? A large enterprise to roll something like this out. Not your tool. Your tool is the insurance policy on the huge program, right? So I think that's really compelling. So with all of that said, what's next for QChange? What's coming up for the business or the product?
Yeah, I mean, we're so the product, I'm trying to think of what I can say and not say. We are obviously doing a capital raise at the moment. So
Okay.
I'll leave that there. I can't really talk about the details of that in this environment, but doing a capital raise. And that's really important because for us, now that we've got these 3 or 4 really big early users, we're getting some really strong proof of concept in terms of the product and its efficacy. And so from a product perspective, the next real evolution of our product starts to become around the community side of it. So the sharing of your wins, the giving gratitude for those who are helping you, the boosters, which are those who provide feedback. And the other really big area, George, that I touched upon earlier that I think is honestly our biggest opportunity with a partner, if we find the right partner, is you look at all these LMS systems or e-learning systems, the utilization of those are really, really low on the whole, but every organization's obliged to have one, right? You got to have it. We all need it. Well, with our solution, we have the ability to partner with somebody and pull in soft skill content at that point of self and other assessment and say, hey, here's a gap. Here is a link to a learning on this thing that you're practicing. Go click on this. Now it drives utilizations of this LMS solution. It also then gives them content to focus on. And more importantly, from a behavioral standpoint, when you capture somebody, when there is a gap in their perception, they are way more likely to do something with that than if you say, hey, you have a problem here. Now go find out how to use it or where the content is or where to do this. Because human beings are busy. So they're not going to go find that 10, 15 minutes at the end of the day to go do that 90% of the time. So we can deliver that in the flow of work, personalized for that person, which means we're going to drive utilization for our partners as well. So I think the last thing I would say where we're really going is the roadmap, meaning if you're a mid-level manager trying to move up, here are the skills or soft skills you should have at that next level and taking you on that journey so that when you're ready to go, you have that ability and have the skill sets as you're going and closing that gap. So when you get into that new management position, you've got some foundations for you already.
Yeah, that's great. That's a lot. And you've got a full plate. No,
yes.
No rest for the weary, I guess, as they say. So I just want to thank you for your time today. This, I always learn something when I'm talking to you about behavioral change and about QChange. Where can folks go to learn more?
Yeah, just simply go to QChange.com. It's the letter Q, change.com. And that was a lot of information. You can just email me directly at jkelley, Kelley, at QChange.com. I'm unfortunately very quick to twitch back to emails pretty rapidly. So if you email me, you'll get probably a response fairly quick.
All right. James, thanks again for your time. And thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, George.